Good evening. Tonight we are talking with Etta Allen, who is president of Allen Heating and Sheet Metal, which is a very unorthodox career for a woman, and we want to talk to you about that and about how you got from childhood to being the president of a company like that. Can you tell us about how your life started out, where you were born and so forth?
Okay. Yes, I was born in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was an only child of two very young parents.
Oh, really?
And early in my life, in fact, at the very beginning of school, I was enrolled in a private girls' school, a convent, and I spent my early years going to school and then spending summers at home with my parents. So that was the beginning of my education.
Mm-hmm.
I attribute a great deal of the success in my life to that training, to living with the sisters. I think that it enabled me, first of all, to have a very positive outlook on life. I don't know psychologically how you would value this, but I always remember the sisters saying that you were never given anything to deal with in life that God would not also provide the strength. And I grew up with that kind of an attitude,
Mm-hmm.
which made for a very, very positive outlook on life.
I should say.
The self-discipline, which I think has been a tremendous asset, came from those early years
Mm-hmm.
at the convent. So I value that part of my life greatly. My paternal grandfather, who lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico, was very committed to community involvement and had been very politically involved all
Now
of
we
his
know where
life.
that came from.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And then my maternal grandfather was a rancher, a cattle rancher, and a great believer in the land and very into the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I often think that that one of the things that they taught me is the love of both of these two extremes, and it has led for a very balanced life. And I think that's really why I own a vineyard in Sonoma, and why on weekends I virtually become a farmer,
Mm-hmm.
and then during the week I'm very involved in my community.
Sure. I had no idea about the vineyard in Sonoma, but that certainly
Yeah.
makes sense, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Did you have any idea what you wanted to be when you grew up?
No, I had, as I was growing up, I had two loves, and one of them I felt that I wanted to be a writer,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one was that I loved airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Me too.
Did you too?
Both of us, yes, go ahead.
and I did as a teenager get my my license to
Uh-huh.
fly, and I did do a fair amount of private
Mhm.
flying.
Mm-hmm.
But then I married. I married quite young, and I settled into wife and motherhood,
Mm-hmm.
and that became a very important part of my life. So
Mhm.
I gave up, on the writing and the
Mhm.
flying.
Mhm.
Both of those did not seem like things that I could combine.
Mm-hmm. Had you thought to be a
Yeah.
stewardess or a pilot? A commercial
No, I
pilot?
wanted to be a pilot.
You did?
Mhm.
Uh-huh. That's very
Yes.
interesting. You say you married young.
Mhm.
Does this mean you did not go on to college?
I didn't go on
You
to
didn't
college.
go on to college.
I married very shortly after I left high school.
Uh-huh. I know you went into business,
Yes.
the business,
Yes.
but did you have other interests that you pursued?
Well, at the time that we went into business, we had the two small boys, and I was, very involved in my homemaking and
Mhm.
nursery school and the things that we do with
Uh-huh.
youngsters of that age. And I was going to work in the business only till we got started. Like all young couples with a new business, we started on a shoestring.
Mm-hmm.
And the plan that we had was that I would help until we were at the point that we could hire some additional help, and then I would go back to my role at home.
Mm-hmm. How old were the kids when you started doing that?
Jim was probably about 6, and Craig was probably about 2.
Oh my.
So they were young.
Was it difficult for you to find the time to do that? How did you
Well,
work
the way that we did it was that we basically had the office at home. We had the company in Fairfax, but we had the office at home. And I did most of the work in between nap times and sleep times, and, you know, just fitted it in. And it worked out quite well.
Mm-hmm.
And we were almost at the point that we were beginning to lay plans for me to go back to being a full-time homemaker, because the company was beginning to grow and do well. And Jim was involved in an accident. He was hit by a car while he was talking to the Fairfax building inspector. And that took him out of commission for about 3 months. He had a very, very severe artery injury in the leg. And so that was my first experience in running the company by myself. But it was on a short term.
Please excuse me. What had you done up until that point? What share of the work did you do?
Interesting enough, I started out that I was going to do office work. As it turned out, with 2 people starting a company, I found myself not only doing office work, but doing everything else that needed to be done during the day if he was not available, which meant that I learned to estimate. If someone walked into the shop and needed to have something made, if it was simple, I could work on the break. I just sort of, you know, was just a combination of doing everything. So it was a very good learning experience.
I should say.
So about the time that I was going to give this up and go back to my own interests, Jim was involved in this accident, and it was through his being inactive at that time that the doctor talked him into having a biopsy on a growth that he had on his neck, which he had been neglecting to have done. And within a week, our life was just turned upside down. He was, within a week, he was in Stanford. They discovered he had lymphosarcoma. He was given 6 months to live. And, you know, our life was just upside down. So when he came home, with this new information that we had of 6 months of life, we began to very seriously evaluate how I was going to survive. And it seemed to me at the time that I had 2 options. I could either go ahead with a company, which I had a lot of faith in, and which I knew from the bottom up, or I could go out at that period of time, which was in the early 60s, and, you know, probably get a job as a secretary or a bookkeeper and attempt to raise these 2 kids and see a husband through an illness on that. And that just didn't look to me like a very bright future. So I decided that I would try the company route.
How long had the company been in existence?
We'd had the company at that point for about 4.5 years.
So you had 4.5 years on the job. That's still not a lot.
No,
but
it isn't,
I'm sure you
but
hadn't been training for this all your life.
Right. The thing that worked to our advantage is that Jim lived much longer than the 6 months. He went on the experimental program at Stanford, which meant that any new drug that came along, he took. And this put the cancer into remission several times. He also had a very good attitude about it, was a very positive person, and so consequently he did very well. So he lived several years. What happened through those several years, because we lived on a day-to-day basis, we never knew whether these drugs were going to work or not work, was that I began to take a greater role in the company. And I also realized after Jim's death that almost on a daily basis he was training me without my being totally aware of it. It was very important to Jim that we survive as a family. And he hung in there, I think, until he felt comfortable with my being able to go ahead with it. In fact, his doctor felt that he had lived far beyond what he would have expected him to live, and he felt that the driving force was to see his family in a position where they could continue to survive.
Without him.
Yeah.
Did you feel ready?
That's interesting because I remember that one of the last trips that we ever made to Stanford, that the doctor talked with me and he said, you realize that Jim is ready to die, but you need to let go. He's a very committed guy and he's not going to die until he knows that you can let go. And we came back from Stanford, and I remember all the way home thinking to myself, as Jim was dozing from the chemotherapy, thinking to myself, you know, God, I don't care how we have to live. I don't want him to die. At this point, I was driving him back and forth to treatments 4 days a week and working from 5 in the morning to midnight to keep us together.
What was the thought in the industry that a woman was suddenly going to take over? It wasn't that sudden, I guess, but did you confront any disbelievers?
Well, I confronted some difficulties. First of all, one of the real difficulties was getting a license. Before Jim's death, one of the things that I realized was that the licensing structure at that time meant that when Jim died, since he was the name on the license, we had 3 months within which to get another license, or we had to cease the operation. The requirements at that time for a license were 10 years on-the-job experience. Apprenticeships were closed to women, so it was a catch-22. They're just, you know, they said you had to have a license, but there was no way of getting it.
Get it.
Yeah. I had to just really hang in there and do a lot of letter writing in order to finally get a response, and I did get my license. Now I am called a woman in a non-traditional career. In those days, nobody had thought of the fancy wording, so it wasn't that. But in the last few years, as I talk to more young women going into non-traditional careers, I realized that one of my greatest advantages was in really not knowing I was a woman in a non-traditional career. I was so focused on my family, on keeping my family together, that I didn't have any time or energy to focus on obstacles. And that was a real advantage, because one of the things that I find with women in non-traditional careers is that so often they feel they have to change their personalities. They try to become more masculine. I didn't do any of these things. Basically, not because I was real smart, I just didn't have time to think about that. So I probably just innocently went through a lot of problems without knowing them, because I was very focused. But I also think that kind of focus avoided a lot of problems, because I think that if you are being truly yourself and you are committed to what you are doing and you are positively motivated, you don't put people on the defensive. So it was a real asset.
Well, it sounds to me as though the label of non-traditional career, it didn't ever occur to you because you were comfortable with it, you knew you could do it, and you had learned it well, and you just did it.
I was often told that the way I operate in business would mean that I would not succeed, that I could not be successful.
What did they mean by that?
What they meant by that is that I have a very strong code of ethics, and I do not believe in game playing. I'm very open. I'm very open with the people that work with me. I'm very open with the contractors that I bid to or anyone that I do business with. And I have never been hesitant to speak out if I saw an injustice being done. And I've been told that a number of times that you couldn't succeed that way. And so I guess I'm here to say you can. I found out that I was a lot stronger than I'd ever realized. I found out that that through grief, at times when I thought that I heard so much inside that I was going to stop breathing, that there was such a strong desire in me to keep breathing that I went right on breathing. I found that I could step to the head of a company and make some really tough decisions, both financially, emotionally, every which way, and could assume the responsibility of those decisions. I found out that I was able to go ahead and raise 2 sons and see them through all the things that they have to deal with, and do it alone. There were a lot of times when I really wished that Jim had been there to talk things over with, that it would have been support, but he wasn't, and so I could do it. Yeah, I really found my potential.
Well, you must feel pretty good about what you've accomplished.
Yeah, I feel good about myself.
Tell me, if you will, because I know that you've established a number of firsts because of your career. Can you tell us what some of those are?
Okay.
Some of the trailblazing you did?
I was the first woman president of Marin Builders Exchange, and the first woman to serve on a board of directors of the exchange. That was a first, not only because one of the requirements is that you have to hold a license, but also because they had not had a woman in that position in the county. They have since that time had one other woman as the president, so I think that that was a real trailblazer in this community. I went on to be one of the first women to serve on the executive committee of the California State Builders Exchanges. That was a real first at a state level, because women, at the time that I came in, they had never had a woman serve on their executive committee.
Were there any things professionally that you aspired to that were closed to you?
No, I can't think of any. There were some very difficult things for me. It was very difficult for me in the early days to enter a room with several hundred men in my industry and be the only woman, and often sit there while the male speaker would say, well, I had a joke I was going to tell, but I see there's a woman in the audience. And, you know, I used to want to cringe and sit under my chair instead on my chair. And then after a while, I began to have the attitude that that was their problem and not mine. So I sat up tall and let them deal with it. That was very difficult. And I would always, at meetings like that, which were important for me to attend for my industry, I always made sure that I arrived just at the dinner hour and not at the cocktail hour, because I found it difficult, and that I left immediately as soon as the meeting was over. Those situations were difficult.
I sense that you never felt it was necessary for you to tell the stories yourself.
No. And it was never necessary for me to pretend that I wasn't embarrassed by them if they did embarrass me.
Good for you. I think that you traveled some shoals that other women have found somewhat difficult, and you seem to have done them very well. I know that many of us in the community are aware of your position with Allen Heating and Sheet Metal, but we also know you as a community volunteer. Can you tell us something about the things you've done in the community and what led you to do them?
Okay, I serve on a number of boards. The one thing I'm very proud of has been my involvement on the community college district, because it touches young people, and I have a great interest in young people and their education. That's important to me. I'm very proud of my work on the YWCA and the Explorers, Boy Scouts.
Mm-hmm.
I could go on with a number of boards that I serve on, but the things that touch young people are extremely important to me. I have a very strong feeling of returning to my community, what it has given to me, and I even believe this in my company. I have a company policy that we return every year a percentage of our profits back to the community in donations of some kind.
Mm-hmm. What kinds of things do you concentrate on? The Y and the college?
Yes, those kinds of things.
Wonderful.
And basically, I feel strongly about a community that has given me the privilege of succeeding as I feel I have succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really want, with all my heart, now that I'm in a position to take time from my company, I want with all my heart to give as much of that time as I possibly can to the community.
Mm-hmm. I'll bet you're in demand. I know a lot of boards that would like to have someone like you. Tell me, what do you think are the particular strengths that you have to bring to an organization like the College Board?
Well, what I've discovered are my greatest strength, both with the community college and with other organizations, is my ability to organize.
Mm-hmm.
I really have learned that I have some very, very strong points and some good abilities on organization and management.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the organizations that I volunteer with, my volunteering is done on a basis of financial organization and financial expertise.
Do you have any regrets about that, about the direction your life took?
No.
No?
No, I don't. You know, and this may seem strange, but I feel a loss because Jim did not live a longer life. But even that is not a regret,
Mm-hmm.
because it was such a growing experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a growing experience that even that is not a regret.
Do you have any unfulfilled dreams? Is there anything more that you'd like to accomplish?
There are a number of things that I would like to accomplish on a community level.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I am concerned about the trend of politics in our community. That's a deep concern to me.
Would you define that?
I think that so many of the people that are entering the political field today are entering it with their own agenda. And that really worries me, because with my experience at the community college, I think that one of the things that finally put the community college back on a solid basis was a board that was able to work beyond their own egos and their own agendas,
Mm-hmm.
and to look at the needs of students and to really focus in on that particular issue. And it concerns me that there are many areas of our county in which people in politics are not looking at the real issues and not looking at the overall needs of the county, but are looking at their own agendas. That's a real concern to me.
Mm-hmm. Other areas, you started to say one of them was your concern about political life of the county. Are there other things in that you want to accomplish in the community life, or that you see as concern?
I want us to be sure that we provide the best available education to our young people, and that's to all our people.
Mm-hmm.
At the community college level, I've had an opportunity to talk to many, many young women who really become entrapped. If they have young children, they don't make enough to really get themselves out of that hole they're in.
Mm-hmm.
And they many times can't even get childcare to go to school. It's like they're stuck. It's like there's no way to get above that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real concern to me.
And I assume that you're bringing this kind of philosophy to your role on the board. How long have you been on the board?
I've been on the board. I'm serving my second four-year term. I'm into the second year of that, and I served 1 year unappointed, so I've been on the board 6 years.
Well, you're certainly have a large name recognition in the county for the kind of leadership you have brought to the board. Everything that you talk about doing is very high-minded. Do you ever do anything silly for yourself?
I have, sometimes I have the feeling that I was born, you know, kind of growing up. And that may come from having very young parents who sometimes I think needed more supervision than I did.
You did.
I have a lot of things I enjoy. I really enjoy the outdoors. I really enjoy hiking, as you obviously see. I really enjoy a dog.
Tell us about the vineyard.
The vineyard is a real love for me. You know, it's a place that I go to on Friday night and forget about clocks and forget about traffic and really deal with things that are more with the earth.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
You have achieved balance there, haven't you?
It's a great balance. It's a great therapy.
It's wonderful. How about the boys?
The boys are grown, and they both work in the business with me.
Is there something I haven't asked you, something about yourself you'd like to tell us, something you'd like to share with other women?
Well, I think that the thing that I would share with women is that as we are getting out into the workplace more and more and getting into more and more executive roles, is that I think it's terribly important not to lose sight of who we are and not to lose sight of our feminine side, because we're really very, very fortunate as women to be able in this day and age to really have very fulfilled lives. And by that I mean that we are out in the workplace and the community, and at the same time we have our families and we have all those wonderful feminine things that make us so special.